Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They came for my dock before I even unpacked. A sharp-suited woman, a forged map, and a flag that screamed authority, but I knew better. They thought I'd roll over. Instead, I dug in. This isn't just a lake house story. It's a war story with paperwork, trespass, and one hell of a reckoning. I stood on the dock with a coffee in one hand and my other tucked in the pocket of an old flannel I refused to throw away, watching the mist roll off the lake like it had somewhere better to be. My wife, Jenny, leaned back in the rocking chair behind me, wrapped in a faded quilt and still half asleep. We had spent our first night at the new lake house listening to frogs gossip and the occasional hum of a motor from the far side of Lake Sinclair. For the first time in a long while, I felt something settle inside me. Peace, maybe. Or whatever the word is for that moment before trouble finds you. The house itself was nothing fancy, just an old two-story with cedar siding and a roof that probably needed a little love. But it sat on 5 acres of private land, thick with pine and sweet gum, and most importantly, it came with something more valuable than square footage, a grandfathered registered dock that had been sitting proudly in the water since the mid-80s. 2 boat slips, a small storage locker, and a set of pilings that could hold through a tropical storm. The previous owner, a Navy vet's widow named Mrs. Garland, had tears in her eyes when she handed me the original permits. "They tried to get me to take it down back in 1994, she said, "but your name's on it now. Don't let them push you around." At the time, I thought it was just a sentimental warning. I should have known better. It was just after 9 when the first car rolled up the gravel driveway, a white Lexus SUV that looked like it hadn't seen a mud puddle in its life. 2 men in polos and khakis stepped out first, each holding a manila folder like it was an arrest warrant. Then came the woman, mid-50s, lean face, aggressive cheekbones, a gray pantsuit sharp enough to open envelopes. Her heels clicked across the flagstone as she marched straight toward me like I was a parked car in a fire lane. "You must be Mr. Brady," she said, not offering a hand. "Karen Logan. I'm the president of the Shoreline HOA." I nodded once. "This property isn't part of any HOA." She smiled like I had told her puppies were extinct. "That's what we're here to discuss." I set my coffee down. Jenny sat up straighter behind me. The 2 men fanned out behind Karen like polite Secret Service. "We've received reports that your dock is being used," Karen said, opening her folder. "That's going to be an issue." "Why?" "Because that structure sits on water that falls under our community's shared recreational zone," she replied. "All HOA shoreline usage must be approved, and your dock isn't." I blinked. "The dock was built in 1986. It's registered with the state. I have the license in the house. This parcel isn't inside your HOA's boundaries." She tilted her head. "Well, that's funny because I have a map right here that says otherwise." One of her men stepped forward and unfolded a printed map that looked like it had been clipped from a brochure. I didn't even bother looking. "I worked for the Federal Waterways Division for 15 years, I said calmly. "I know where my lines are. Your association can't claim jurisdiction over land or structures that predate your charter. I have the original survey, county deed, shoreline registration, and a still valid dock permit." Karen raised a brow. "We'll need to see that in writing." "You will," I said. "Right after you leave my property." One of the men chuckled under his breath. Karen didn't. "Look, Mr. Brady, I understand you're new here, but it's important to integrate into the community. Mistakes like this happen. You probably didn't realize your dock sits on shared access water." "No," I said. "What happened is someone saw a new owner and thought it was open season." Karen's lips flattened. "We'll be contacting the county. Until this is resolved, we ask that you refrain from using the dock." "That won't be happening." "Then I'm afraid this may escalate." She turned without another word and headed back to her SUV. The men followed, tossing me a look that hovered somewhere between pity and curiosity. Jenny came up beside me and slipped her arm through mine as the Lexus pulled away. "Well," she said, "that didn't take long." "No," I muttered, picking my coffee back up. "No, it didn't." I took a slow sip and stared out over the water again, but the peace I'd felt that morning was already sinking somewhere under the surface. I woke up to the sound of metal clanking where no metal should have been. It was still early, barely past 6, and the sun hadn't climbed all the way up yet, just a gray line bleeding over the treetops. I grabbed a hoodie and headed outside barefoot, not bothering with coffee. Jenny was still asleep upstairs. Lucky her. I followed the sound down the path toward the lake, crunching over damp pine needles. As I came around the bend past the shed, I saw it. A bright yellow flag, flapping in the morning breeze like someone was staging a regatta. It was zip-tied to the rail post of my dock, loud and impossible to miss, with a printed HOA seal in the middle and the words "Subject to Community Review" in bold capital letters. Beneath it, flapping from a plastic file protector taped to the post, was a laminated notice. This dock is located in Shared Community Access Zone and is under temporary suspension until verified by Shoreline Association Committee. Do not use until cleared. At the base of the dock, someone had gone the extra mile. A concrete cinder block sat beside the trail, buried halfway into the dirt, with a heavy steel chain bolted into the side. It didn't connect to anything, just sat there like a threat. We can do this again, and next time it'll be worse. I stared at the whole display in silence for a few seconds, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. Then I took a deep breath, walked back to the garage, and fired up my excavator. The block was out of the ground and in the back of my utility trailer within 10 minutes. I folded the flag neatly, placed the laminated notice on top of it, and strapped both to the top of the cinder block using the same chain they had left. Then I towed the whole thing up the road and left it at the edge of the HOA's common area, right beneath a decorative wooden sign that said, "Lakeview welcomes you." When I got back, Jenny was standing on the porch in pajamas, holding a cup of coffee, and looking at the now naked dock. "They really did it?" she asked. "They did. Jesus. Not even him could fix these people." We went inside. I pulled out my external drive and opened the folder marked Property Validation Package, a lovingly assembled stack of scanned documents I'd been curating since escrow. I added the photos of the flag, the chain, the block, and the installation site. Then I opened my contacts list and dialed a number I hadn't used in almost 5 years. The voice on the other end picked up on the second ring. "Duval." "Morning, Nate." "It's Randall." There was a pause. "Damn, haven't heard that voice in a minute. You on fire watch again?" "Not exactly. I need an informal inspection down in Baldwin County." "Problem?" "HOA thinks they own the water." Nate groaned audibly. "Why is it always an HOA? I thought you were retired." "Retired from the government, not from having a spine." "All right, send me the coordinates. I'll get eyes on it. But I'm off books on this unless we find something actionable." "I'm counting on that." I sent him the GPS pins, the property boundary survey, and a summary of what had just occurred, all time-stamped and geotagged. Then I sent a second copy to the official complaints inbox for the Georgia Waterways Regulatory Division, just to make things formal. While I was at it, I filed a second complaint with the Baldwin County Zoning Office, unauthorized alteration of privately licensed riparian property. By the time lunch rolled around, I had replies from both offices. The first one was from Nate, and it was short. "You're not going to believe this shit. Their dock overlaps a private boundary line. We'll confirm on site. This may get interesting." The second was a standard acknowledgement from the county. They'd open an inquiry, schedule a visual survey, and notify involved parties. Translation: the HOA just stepped into the spotlight, and the spotlight bites back. Jenny watched me click through the documentation, her expression caught between awe and irritation. "Are you enjoying this?" "I am, in fact," I said. "Immensely." She shook her head. "God help them. God's busy." "I'll do." Later that day, I printed out all correspondence, placed it into a binder, and labeled it in big letters, "In case of HOA bullshit." I slid it onto the kitchen shelf next to the cookbooks. Felt like the right place for it. At dusk, we walked back down to the dock. I brought a folding chair and a thermos. Jenny sat beside me and tossed a few pebbles into the water. "Think they'll come back?" "I hope so," I said, sipping slowly. "Next time, I want them on camera." By the time Friday rolled around, I had almost convinced myself they'd gotten the message. The HOA hadn't sent anyone else stomping down my trail, no more flags had shown up, and the dock sat undisturbed for 3 whole days. I even let myself relax, fixed the west railing, tightened some bolts on the boat cleats, and hauled out the old fishing chair that used to belong to Mrs. Garland's husband. It squeaked like a dying possum when I sat in it, but it held. Jenny laughed and told me I looked like an old man auditioning for a catfish documentary. For a moment, I believed maybe that first flag stunt had been a bluff, a test, something performative to make me flinch. But then Saturday morning happened. I walked out just after sunrise with a cup of coffee and almost dropped it when I saw it. A new flag. This one red, staked into the dirt halfway down my private trail. Under it, a plastic sandwich board with HOA branding, the kind you see outside open houses, with a freshly laminated sign that read, "Caution, pending community action. This property is under review for shoreline non-compliance. Do not alter or interfere with marked structures." And as if that wasn't enough of a screw you, someone had placed 2 orange traffic cones right at the mouth of the trail, as if they were planning to redirect boat traffic through my damn living room. Jenny came outside a few minutes later, saw me standing still at the edge of the trail, and just muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." "Oh, they're escalating," I said, voice flat. "And now it's getting fun." I took another round of photos, documented the sign, the cones, and the exact GPS coordinates, then checked my security footage. And sure enough, at 3:48 in the morning, a familiar white SUV rolled up the shoulder of the road and parked just past the ditch. A man in a windbreaker stepped out, one of the 2 goons who came with Karen the first day, carrying the red flag, the board, and what looked like a damn hammer drill. He spent 12 minutes planting their circus display in my trail like he was claiming Mars. I zoomed in. License plate, clear as day. Timestamp, perfect. Full face, got it. I sent the clip to Nate. His response was almost instant. HOAs building a case? Cute. Guess what I found? Their east community dock extends past the shoreline limit by 12 feet, and no permit on file. Also, they installed benches on the municipal slope without license. Want me to hold off or go loud? I texted back, go full brass band. Then I started printing. I spent the next 2 hours preparing physical copies of everything. Screenshots of the video, my original survey and dock permit, the laminated stunt signage, and a highlight map showing exactly how far outside HOA jurisdiction my property sat. I even labeled the cones as evidence of unauthorized territorial signage in red marker. Then I made 2 binders, one for my records and one addressed to the Baldwin County Zoning Board. At around 11, a neighbor named Dale wandered over from 3 houses down. Retired Coast Guard, used to own a bait shop, the kind of guy who always smelled faintly of boat fuel and chewing tobacco. He looked at the new sign, whistled, and shook his head. "They're really going for it," he said. Apparently, I replied. Karen tried something similar last year with the Rosenthals, claimed their canoe rack was in the HOA setback zone, took 3 letters from the county and a visit from a land surveyor to shut her up. What happened after that? She sent them a fruit basket, passive-aggressive style. I snorted. "I don't like fruit. I prefer injunctions." He grinned. "Let me know if you need backup. Some of us are tired of her pulling this crap." That night, as I sat on the dock with Jenny and watched the stars come out over the black surface of the lake, I felt a shift in the air. Not just tension, movement. Something building. And I had a gut feeling that Karen wasn't finished yet. No one posts warning signs unless they're planning the next step, which meant I needed to get ahead of her. And I already knew how. The letter from the county arrived on Tuesday, and it had the unmistakable scent of bureaucracy, printed on stiff cream stock with a bold seal in the corner and phrasing so neutral it was practically apologetic. Notification of scheduled inspection property at parcel ID 164B-22-201 registered to Mr. Randall Brady is scheduled for an on-site shoreline use and compliance inspection on Thursday at 10 a.m., initiated in response to a formal complaint received from the Lakeview Shoreline HOA regarding potential encroachments on shared water access, zones, and non-permitted structures. I stared at the sentence 3 times before I chuckled. Jenny watched me from the kitchen sipping her tea. Another threat? Better. They took the bait. Inspection? Yep. Thursday at 10. Guess we should bake something. I spent the next 2 days preparing, not to defend myself, but to make sure everything on my side was too clean to argue with. I pressure washed the dock, scrubbed the pilings, even repainted the edges where the wood had started to gray. I reprinted my entire shoreline license packet, laminated a copy, and taped it to the storage box at the end of the dock. And just for good measure, I placed a fold-out camping chair at the trailhead with a handwritten sign that read, "Visitors welcome, bring logic." Thursday morning was crisp and cloudless. I wore a collared shirt for the first time since moving in and set up a table with bottled water, copies of all documentation, and a binder labeled HOA Shenanigans Visual Index. At 9:58, I heard a car door slam. She was tall, red-haired, with mirrored sunglasses and a clipboard, the kind of woman who could quiet a room just by walking into it. She introduced herself with a firm handshake. Sharon May, County Zoning and Shoreline Compliance. Randall Brady, I replied. Former federal water inspector, current nuisance to authoritarian HOAs. She smiled faintly and flipped open the clipboard. Let's get started. 10 minutes later, Karen arrived, uninvited and overdressed, in heels entirely inappropriate for shoreline terrain. She brought 2 new lackeys with her, a man in a sport coat and a younger woman taking frantic notes on a tablet. Karen approached like she was the host of the event. Ms. May, thank you for coming. We've gathered multiple witness statements from residents. Sharon held up a hand without looking at her. Ms. Logan, this inspection was initiated based on your complaint. I'll begin with the property owner. You may observe, but do not interfere. Karen blinked like she'd been slapped with a rule book. I walked Sharon down the trail. She took notes, measured setbacks with a laser rangefinder, asked about construction dates, then examined the dock. She checked the license number mounted to the support post. She nodded. This dock predates the HOA by nearly 20 years. You've maintained registration without lapse? Yes, renewed every 5 years. Last renewal was last April. Any structural changes since the initial build? Nope. I added cleats and resealed the wood, but the footprint's identical. Sharon stepped back and looked out over the lake. That's one of theirs, right? She asked, pointing to a long pier jutting out from the HOA common area. Correct. That's the east dock. She squinted, pulled out a map, then a printed satellite image. That's interesting. That dock exceeds the permitted 50-foot extension limit, and the shoreline zone here, she traced her pen, is designated as municipal reserve, not HOA managed. She radioed something into her phone. A few minutes later, a second inspector, this one from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, arrived. Apparently, Sharon had brought backup. Karen finally broke. She stomped up the trail in her clicking heels, eyes wide with faux urgency. I thought this was about his illegal dock. Sharon turned slowly. Ms. Logan, this property is fully compliant. What concerns me are your community's structures, which appear to violate zoning, extension, and municipal use ordinances. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. The younger woman behind her took one cautious step back. Sharon walked past her, clipboard in hand, and nodded to me. We'll file a full report. You'll receive a copy. For now, Mr. Brady, you're in the clear. I couldn't help it. I smiled. Much obliged. As they walked back toward the road, I caught the man in the sport coat quietly muttering something to Karen. Her answer, though whispered, was clear enough for me to hear. He was supposed to get shut down. Instead, I watched her walk away with the kind of posture people use when they're pretending their world isn't collapsing. I turned to Jenny, who had been filming the whole thing from the porch with a zoom lens. That went well, she said. Extremely, I replied, and I hadn't even shown them the second binder yet. The envelope came on Monday, hand-delivered by some kid who looked like he'd been promised $20 and a slice of HOA pizza for his trouble. He didn't even make eye contact, just jogged up, dropped the thing on my porch, and scurried back to the waiting SUV like it was an extraction mission. No knock, no doorbell, just retreat and vanish. I picked it up, flipped it over, and saw the logo, Lakeview Shoreline Homeowners Association, Legal Affairs Division, which, given what I knew, was probably Karen with a new Word document and a fake letterhead. Inside was a 4-page packet printed on thick stock, full of legalese that desperately wanted to sound intimidating. Right at the top, in bold, notice of legal action. The Lakeview Shoreline HOA hereby notifies Mr. Randall Brady of formal litigation proceedings regarding unauthorized structures on shared community waterfront space and violation of collective property rights. This suit seeks removal of the non-compliant dock located at parcel ID 164B-22-201, along with restitution for damages caused to community access and view obstruction. I stared at it for a good 30 seconds before bursting out laughing. Jenny looked up from her laptop. Oh God, what now? They're suing me, I said, dropping the packet on the table like it was a coupon flyer, claiming my dock's hurting their aesthetic. She raised an eyebrow. Didn't the inspector literally say you were compliant? On the record, with witnesses, and video, and maps, and permits. But hey, never let reality get in the way of a good HOA crusade. Still, I wasn't going to underestimate them. This wasn't just noise anymore. This was escalation by paper. I spent the afternoon prepping my response, not just for court, but for war. I called my old friend Melanie Park, a retired land use attorney who now did selective consulting from her mountain cabin. "Randy," she said as soon as she answered, "what did you do now?" "Apparently, I obstructed their spiritual connection to lakefront symmetry." Karen again. She brought reinforcements. Mel sighed. "Send me the paperwork." I'll tear it apart while I drink something stronger than patience. I scanned every page and added my own binder of evidence. Full shoreline license with official seal. Deed of ownership with exact parcel boundaries. Satellite overlays showing HOA's docks extending beyond legal limits. Video of the county inspection and Sharon's statement on site. GPS-tagged photos of their flags, signs, and cones on my land. Security footage of their agent trespassing at 3:48 a.m. A witness statement from neighbor Dale, who saw the same guy do the same thing to the Rosenthals. Then I wrote a brief statement, plain and sharp. The HOA has no jurisdiction over my parcel. The dock in question is fully licensed, predating the HOA by nearly 2 decades. The plaintiff's claims are factually incorrect, legally baseless, and part of an ongoing campaign of harassment, trespass, and attempted intimidation. We filed our formal response within 48 hours, along with a counterclaim alleging tortious interference with lawful use of licensed shoreline structures, defamation and false claims of jurisdiction, physical trespass and unauthorized marking of private property, emotional distress, legal costs, and reputational harm. The court date was set for 2 weeks out. Meanwhile, Melanie called with her initial impression. "They're not just wrong," she said. "They're legally naked. It's like they printed fantasy fan fiction and stapled it to a lawsuit. Honestly, I'm a little insulted." "Good. Insulted lawyers work harder. I'm filing a motion to dismiss and attaching your entire complaint history against them. Let's see if they want to explain the concrete block incident to a judge." As if summoned by karmic comedy, Karen herself showed up that afternoon. She didn't come alone. She brought a man I hadn't seen before. Mid-40s, tight haircut, expensive sunglasses, carrying a branded leather portfolio that probably cost more than the HOA's annual budget. They parked at the base of my driveway without asking, walked halfway up before I met them. "Mr. Brady," Karen began with forced civility, "we'd like to offer a final opportunity to resolve this amicably." The man beside her cleared his throat like a B-movie villain. "My name is Benjamin Ross. I represent the Lakeview HOA in this matter. We believe this can be settled without court." "By removing my dock?" I asked. "By negotiating a license fee," he said smoothly. "If you agree to join the association retroactively, we can grandfather the structure and avoid litigation." Jenny stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed. "You mean bribe him to surrender his property rights?" Ross adjusted his tie. "We prefer to think of it as—" I cut him off. "You have 1 minute to turn around and walk back to your car before I add attempted extortion to my filings." Karen's jaw tightened. "You're being extremely unreasonable." "No," I said, smiling. "I'm just really good at reading tide charts. And yours is going out fast." They left without another word. As the SUV disappeared up the hill, Jenny looked at me and said, "They just tried to charge you rent for your own land." "Desperation smells like aftershave," I said. "Let them keep talking," because I had a feeling the courtroom was going to be the quietest they'd ever be. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and lost causes. It was a modest chamber, one of those old county courtrooms where the ceiling fans creaked slightly and the microphones picked up every cough like it was a gunshot. The judge, a compact woman named Lucille Trammell, looked like the type who'd once run marathons and now ran courtrooms with the same no-bullshit energy. I'd read up on her, known for hating frivolous civil cases and people who wasted public resources. In other words, Karen had picked the worst possible hill to die on. Jenny sat behind me in the gallery next to Dale and his wife, both dressed like it was Sunday service. Melanie had insisted I wear a suit, so I borrowed one that still fit from my federal days. She looked sharp and mildly terrifying in dark green. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she'd rehearsed this moment in the mirror, and her lawyer Ross had the oily smugness of a man who thought charm could replace facts. The case was called. We stood. Plaintiff, Lakeview Shoreline Homeowners Association, defendant Randall Brady. Trammell got right to it. "I've read both filings," she said, looking over her glasses. Plaintiff claims the defendant has constructed and is utilizing a private dock on community-controlled shoreline without authorization. Defendant claims the HOA has no jurisdiction and is engaging in harassment. Correct? Karen's lawyer rose first. Yes, Your Honor. We believe Mr. Brady's dock impedes community access and constitutes a structure on managed water frontage and, as such, falls under HOA regulation. Melanie stood calmly. Your Honor, the defendant's property lies entirely outside HOA boundaries. The dock in question was built in 1986, licensed under state shoreline law, predates the HOA by 17 years, and has maintained compliance ever since. The judge blinked. Predates? By nearly 2 decades. We've submitted aerial surveys, county records, and the original permitting files. Karen's lawyer attempted a polite scoff. But the water itself is shared use and— Objection, Your Honor, Melanie interrupted. That's not only false, it's misleading. Lake Sinclair is a public reservoir managed by the Georgia Power Company, and shoreline usage is regulated by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, not any private HOA. Trammell raised a brow. Is this true? Mel handed over the laminated letter from the inspection, verified in writing by both county zoning and the DNR. Inspections were conducted just last week. The HOA's docks, however, extend illegally into municipal zones. That made the room stir. Karen's face tightened into a knot of concealed panic. Furthermore, Mel continued, flipping another page, we have video evidence of the plaintiff's agents trespassing on Mr. Brady's land at night, placing unauthorized signage, and attempting to block access to a legal dock. We also filed a counterclaim for harassment, defamation, and tortious interference. Judge Trammell held up a hand. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. The HOA initiated this lawsuit claiming ownership rights over land and water they neither own nor regulate, interfered with a state-licensed structure, and engaged in a pattern of intimidation against a non-member homeowner. That's correct, Your Honor, Melanie said with a small smile. Trammell leaned back. Mr. Ross, would you care to respond? Karen's lawyer stammered. We may have misunderstood the jurisdictional boundaries, but— She cut him off. Misunderstanding is not an excuse for trespassing, nor for wasting this court's time. And then she turned to me. Mr. Brady, anything to add? I stood slowly. Just this, Your Honor. I moved here to enjoy the lake in peace. I've complied with every law on the books. The only obstruction I've faced is a group of people pretending they own more than they do. Trammell nodded once sharply. Case dismissed. Full dismissal with prejudice. Defendant's counterclaim will proceed to review. HOA is ordered to cease all contact with Mr. Brady pending further instruction. Bailiff, please record the exhibits. Karen froze like someone had pulled her batteries. Ross looked like he wanted to melt into the carpet. Back in the hallway, Melanie turned to me. You know what's coming next, right? Retribution? Discovery phase. We're not just pushing back. We're digging. Dale patted me on the back. You made her sweat, Randy. I haven't seen that since she lost the HOA presidency in 2008 and rewrote the bylaws overnight. Jenny looped her arm through mine. You look good in victory. I smiled. It suits me. But as I looked back through the glass pane in the courtroom door, I saw Karen still seated, staring dead ahead like someone who'd just realized she'd brought a squirt gun to a wildfire. This wasn't over, but she was definitely losing ground. The subpoenas went out less than a week after the verdict, and it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Melanie wasn't just filing paperwork, she was conducting a controlled demolition. She filed requests for HOA financial records, meeting transcripts, permit applications, and any written communications regarding my property or my name. Most associations barely keep decent records. This one, as it turned out, was running on duct tape, gossip, and digital napkin notes. 3 days later, we received our first treasure trove, a leaked chain of emails between Karen and the HOA board members. One stood out immediately, sent by Karen herself, timestamped just 2 days before their midnight flag planting stunt. We can't let this guy set a precedent. If he's allowed to use the dock, others will start claiming exemption from dues. Let's force the issue and take the shoreline under review, with signage if needed. Make it look official. County won't care. Jenny read it twice, blinked and said, they basically admitted to staging it. More than that, I said. They knew it was a lie and did it anyway. We added it to the folder labeled intentional misrepresentation. But then came the gold mine. financial records showing that the HOA had been collecting shoreline maintenance fees from homeowners outside its official zone. Folks like me who never signed a thing and legally had no obligation. It wasn't just us either. Mel found 7 separate properties billed over the last 3 years for access to boat ramps or shoreline upkeep they never used and were never entitled to. The HOA called it voluntary support. The invoices said mandatory annual fee. That was fraud, and now we had paperwork to prove it. Mel reached out to the Georgia Department of Consumer Protection, and they opened an inquiry within 48 hours. Suddenly, this wasn't just about docks and signs anymore. It was about a potentially unlicensed association extorting residents under false pretenses. Meanwhile, Karen began to unravel. It started small. She skipped a board meeting, then 2. The HOA newsletter arrived with someone else's name on the masthead. Dale told me she'd been seen arguing with her own board members in the grocery store parking lot, voice raised and finger-jabbing like a cartoon dictator. Then, one evening, just as the sun was dropping over the lake, a black pickup truck pulled into my driveway. I recognized the man who stepped out, Tom Bennett, one of the HOA's more quiet board members. He was the type who always looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He walked slowly, hands up. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, "but I thought you should know." Karen's losing it. She's blaming the board, the county, your wife, probably your damn lawnmower. Sounds like a healthy leader. She forged the second flag order, signed my name on the report. I blinked. "You serious?" He handed me a folded page, an internal memo addressed to the HOA secretary, requesting immediate review of Mr. Brady's non-compliance, complete with Tom's forged signature. "That's a felony," I said. "I know. I've already spoken to the county clerk. She's being investigated. I'm stepping down after this month." "Why tell me?" He looked tired. "Because I'm done pretending she's helping this place. And because the other board members are scared. If this explodes, and it will, we want to be able to say we tried to fix it." I gave him a nod. "Appreciate the warning. And the paper." As he left, I looked at the lake. The air smelled like rain, and the wind had shifted direction. From the porch, Jenny called out, "Was that a white flag?" I smiled. Number just a man finally stepping off a sinking ship. That night, Melanie emailed again. 2 of the other affected homeowners were joining the counterclaim. And the state inquiry had now expanded to include HOA fraud across multiple counties. This was no longer a local feud. It was a wildfire. And Karen? She was standing right in the middle of it, holding the match. The letterhead said State of Georgia, Department of Regulatory Oversight, and it arrived on a Friday morning with the kind of weight you can feel through the envelope. By then, I had already heard the rumors. Karen had missed 3 straight board meetings. Her name had been quietly removed from the HOA's official filings. The community Facebook group, previously a digital echo chamber of HOA propaganda, had turned into a complaint thread war zone, and more than a few neighbors previously silent or compliant had started knocking on my door. They weren't coming to apologize, not yet, but they came curious, nervous, like kids tiptoeing past the principal's office. Inside the envelope were 3 crisp pages. The first was addressed to me, Mr. Brady, following review of submitted documentation, video evidence, and complaints filed by affected homeowners, the Georgia Department of Regulatory Oversight has officially suspended the Lakeview Shoreline Homeowners Association's authority over municipal and private shoreline management pending a full audit and legal review. I read it once, then twice. The second page was a summary of findings. Unauthorized collection of fees from non-member properties. Forged signatures on at least 2 enforcement documents. Construction violations on HOA managed docks and fire pits. False representations of jurisdiction in official correspondence. And the third page, that was the one that made Jenny pour 2 glasses of whiskey at 10 in the morning. Further investigation has revealed a pattern of regulatory overreach, legal misrepresentation, and retaliatory enforcement targeting non-member residents. As a result, Karen Logan has been referred to the State Attorney General's office for potential charges, including document falsification, fraud, and abuse of authority in a corporate governance role. I stood on the porch with the sun breaking over the lake and let that final sentence settle into my bones like heat after a long winter. Later that day, Dale stopped by with a truck full of scrap wood. "Thought maybe you'd want a sign." "What kind of sign?" The kind that says, "I told you so," in fewer words. We built it together on the trail down to my dock. 8 feet wide, anchored in concrete with bold letters carved into thick oak. Private dock. Licensed since 1986. No HOA jurisdiction trespassers will be featured in next court case. By sunset, I had 2 more neighbors asking how to opt out of there. Voluntary shoreline fees. That weekend, local news caught wind of the investigation. A reporter knocked on my door, some junior anchor with a stiff haircut and bright smile. I gave him 10 minutes, told him the whole story while Jenny filmed from the porch. The report aired on Sunday night with the headline, "Lakefront HOA under state scrutiny for fraud, forgery, and false claims." And just like that, the fear shifted. Karen didn't show her face again. I heard she moved out of state, or at least into the city. Her name vanished from the local records within weeks. The board disbanded. The HOA was placed under state-managed oversight for restructuring. Fines were issued, refunds demanded. Lawsuits prepared. As for me, I kept the dock, I kept the land, I kept the peace. And I kept a laminated copy of that final judgment next to the life jackets, right under the laminated photo of Karen standing on my trail with her little yellow flag, back when she still thought she could win. Some folks take trophies. I take receipts. The water is calm now. The wind off the lake is clean. And when I sit on that old dock, fishing pole in hand, and Jenny by my side, I don't think about the fight. I think about how much louder silence can be once the shouting finally stops.